following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Ion Oshkosh. We're very pleased to have you with us tonight. Our guest on this episode is an old friend. He's been here many times in the past, and I don't mean old as in chronologically, because we were just talking about age before the camera started rolling, so just wanted to clarify that for you. But he's an old friend of ours, and he's been on many times, and very pleased to have him back again. Chancellor Rick Wells from the university here in Oshkosh. So
thank you. Thank you for inviting me again.
We appreciate it. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things tonight, but as we're taping this, the new school year is just a couple weeks into the mix here. How's it going so far?
It's going great. I mean, it's been very exciting. The weather's actually cooperated, which is kind of a good thing, and you know we're up significantly in our enrollment, particularly our first-time freshmen and transfers, and the campus appears to be a bit more crowded than usual. But everyone's off to a really great start, and a lot of exciting things going on the campus. So.
Good, and we're going to touch on all of those, or as many as we can in the next hour.
Good.
Why don't you just give us a few highlights of the fall, how it started? You know, I know the dedication of the stadium was one big thing, but what are some highlights starting this fall?
Well, you know, a lot of the highlights, of course, is the opening of the year and getting, you know, 3,000 students moved into the residence halls, which is always quite an interesting experience for everybody. And you know, just kind of opening up the year, you know, so a lot of very interesting, good things happened, you know, from the dedication of the Oshkosh Sports Complex, which just happened a couple days ago, you know, prior to this taping. That was extremely well received. We had the UW-Oshkosh Foundation did their third annual report to the community where they featured and made public, so to speak, the $24 million comprehensive fundraising campaign that's going, and announced that we're at the halfway mark for the new academic building match that we have to do, and well beyond the halfway mark for the scholarship piece. And so that was all very exciting. Jim Vandenheim, one of our alums who started Politico, was a featured speaker, and he was just phenomenal, and people were really, really excited to hear his take on what's going on in Washington in the campaign.
He's really become a national figure, hasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Huh? They have 80 employees now. They started Politico 20 months ago, and he took a chance, and Oshkosh guy, you know, and got it going. And he said they couldn't have written the campaign script the way it turned out, and that was kind of the kind of features, the kind of things that he was talking about. So all those things were, you know, very exciting to get the year going.
And Chancellor, for those who maybe don't know what Jim's website is or his blog site is, do you know it by chance?
I think it's just
political.com.
Yeah,
political.com. It is,
okay.
Right. Yeah.
And that's Politico, not political. So.
Right. Yeah. Political. Very nonpartisan, bipartisan organization that is, you know, just doing a lot to bring greater visibility to the, you know, the political topics generally, particularly coming out of Washington and the campaign in particular. So,
and he was a journalism major.
Yeah, he was a journalism major from Oshkosh. One of the really wonderful things that he did before and after his presentation, when he took questions, was single out faculty, in particular Jim Simmons of our political science department, that got him an internship that really turned his life around. So it's very exciting when our students come back, our alums, and they almost invariably will point out faculty members that were hugely important to them, and sometimes embarrass the faculty member. Jim actually was a little embarrassed, I think, at the wonderful things that his former students said about him. So.
Well, every professor deserves that.
Every once in a while, they should be embarrassed for good reasons.
Yes,
good reasons.
So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned very briefly the new academic building. you know, it was just in the paper, I believe today, as a matter of fact, that you have been kind of quietly raising funds for about the last year and a half or so.
Right.
You're looking to raise $8.6 million for a new academic building.
That's the goal.
So tell us about that, and why the quiet campaign?
Well, you know, you're trying to get things going in terms of identifying enough major lead givers to attract others who may not be as aware of or as connected to the institution to consider, you know, making a gift to help move that huge project forward. And then the way we're selling that, of course, is the state is in. You know, they've committed the $40 million toward the project, as well as the $6 million to relocate the facilities maintenance operation over at Cub Food, and that will be totally redesigned over there, and it's going to be a lot better looking facility in the community right now, which is well, it's not that hard, I got to admit, you know, on there. But it's, you know, it's hugely important to us because we've had to, for reasons to better serve our region, you know, increase the size of the campus. So we have 1,000 more students over the last 6-7 years. We've got funding to add more faculty positions, 27 additional positions that are under search now, and another anticipated, you know, 500 students in enrollment, and we got to get the facilities there to handle all that increased enrollment. So, so it's a very, very important project, very exciting. You know, you don't get to do this very often. The last time we were able to do this was in 1971. So we want to do it well and right, and right now our goal is to make it the first state-funded LEED certified gold building in terms of energy efficiency. We just got a 3D model of it. I'm sorry I couldn't bring it here today. It would have been interesting to see, and it's just hugely exciting. And what that means is what we're trying to do is get the building to be designed in a way that the cost of running it, so to speak, will be 50% less than the old ways of designing these kinds of buildings. And that's a very important kind of thing.
Is there a timetable on when you have to raise the money?
Well, yeah, actually the campaign is roughly 5 years, and we're about a year and a half into it. We are front loading, so to speak, the importance of getting the money, the $8.6 million of that for the academic building. The project will continue to move forward. You know, our hope is we're pretty close to all of that by this coming summer. The basic construction timetable is the facilities maintenance operation should be moved over to the Cub Food site sometime probably this summer, toward the end of the summer, and then they'll start site preparation work for the new academic building a year from now. And it's a big building, so it's a 17-month build out. So basically, you know, we have about a 3-year period to make sure we've got our money available when the bills come due. So
legislature isn't going to take the $40 million back.
No, it's there. It's there. The project will move forward, but we will have to be good. We will have to guarantee our part of it, our 8.6, and then it'll give us some time, you know, within a couple years from now to actually have the money in hand when the bills come due. The way that works is, you know, the various stages of the project, the contractors, architects, and others get paid out. We have a certain percentage of that, and we're fine right now that we've got to be ready when that bill comes due in the next, whatever, 6 months. We've got the money for that part, and then when they turn it, you know, at a different point in the project, the state gives them some more money, and then we have to give our piece, and that type of thing. So, you know, it's going to be a challenge, but we're very confident we'll get it done. You know, we're I think known for making sure we're dogged in how we do things. It took us 5 years to get the Oshkosh Sports Complex, you know, funding in place and done, and that'll be the challenge that we have. And of course, we all know it's very difficult, you know, economic times right now. So raising money of any sort for any really important cause is a very hard thing to do. But we're confident that it will be accomplished.
Do you worry at all about the competition out there for, you know, dollars for things like this?
Yeah, well, those are the kind of things I tend to worry a lot about at a certain level, and it's because there's so many good things out there, and there's, you know, and it's hard to, you know, in any way try to be competitive to, you know, and we don't do this, of course, go out and say, well, you shouldn't give to this very important project and we're more important than that project. When we run into that, and we do, and people say, well, we really like this, but it's not our top priority, you know, basic needs is more important to us, and so we're funding things related to that. You know, our strategy is to say, well, you know, thanks for considering this, and by the way, thank you for supporting, another very important project for our community and our region, and that's the right way to do these things. So you get concerned, there is competition, but I think the important thing is to just keep moving forward. There are a lot of people which is a good thing, they have different kinds of priorities, what's important for them to invest in and support. Now, we like to say we're a big part of the solution in terms of helping turn economies around and have a more vibrant economic future. And that's important to not forget that. I mean, it's important, obviously there's a lot, particularly now, a lot of basic needs out there for just shelter and food and that type of thing. And when you sit there and you say, well, would you give funds to a bricks and mortar in a building? And a person is saying, well, I'm very concerned about folks not being able to get enough to eat or have shelter over their heads. Who's going to argue with that?
Right.
But you've got to balance the crisis kind of support you need with things hopefully that will help reduce or mitigate those types of crises in the future.
Sure. Chancellor, tell us about the academic building. How many classrooms? You're adding 20-some faculty members also, correct?
Well, they're across the campus, and won't all just be in the units that go in there. It'll house the entire College of Business and 10 mostly, well, basically social science departments from our College of Letters and Science. It's a building, I can't give you the exact number of classrooms, but it will accommodate in any given schedule about 14,000 seats for people. That's a number I remember. I mean, it's a large building, 175,000 square feet. And that will have both office space for faculty, but an awful lot of labs and classrooms from small to medium size to a couple of auditoriums that'll handle about, I think it's about 225 students each in those. So it's a very significant building. It'll be one of the largest on our campus.
So first shovel goes in the ground probably in a year from now.
Right around
Summer
now.
or fall of '09.
Right.
And then about another year and a half to complete.
So we're looking at what would be 2011 academic year for the opening of the building.
Okay, excellent. Well, since the Chancellor,
I want to follow up on a building question.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll just make a disclaimer. My wife is a professor in special ed,
Right.
so these questions are mine, they're not hers. But I
Okay.
want to ask you a couple questions about the nursing education building.
Right.
First of all, there's twin elevators in that building. And
Right.
either one or neither of them have worked consistently over the last 2
Right.
years.
Right.
At an all-college meeting yesterday, the Dean of Education said, file complaints with OSHA and ADA. Basically, I can't do anything about it because it's been going on for so long. How does someone who is teaching, who has materials on the 6th floor, take their materials from the 6th floor to a classroom building on the 2nd floor? How does a disabled person get up to visit a teacher on the 5th floor? And then the other issue is, in the summer, 73 people in that college signed a petition asking for an environmental audit from the administration. They think that building is toxic. Would you respond to both the elevator and the toxic building?
Well, okay, I guess so. The easier questions are over. No, these are two hugely important questions. One, this is just one example of what happens when you have buildings, nursing and education rather, are in CLO. They were built in the 60s, maybe a little bit into the 70s as well, but you cannot have buildings that old where there hasn't been any major maintenance or renovation on them without having problems, elevators being an example. Exactly. So what's actually going on is they're retrofitting and replacing all the elevators in all of our buildings in that particular vintage. Okay. And these projects it's frustrating that it's taking so long. I'm afraid sometimes that, because these are things you do with the state, and the state has its own schedule as when they come in and when they do things, and I wish that there was a better priority and understanding, given to something as important as elevator. It's not just moving materials up and down, but we have a lot of people, for any number of reasons, that need to use the elevators. They're not handicapped accessible. Okay. So you have to accommodate and go to them and switch the classes, try to find out who really does, has a physical handicap. So it's very frustrating for all of us. But no more so than for the faculty and the students that have every right to expect that elevators would be a good operating order. Understanding it every once in a while, they're going to go down and all that. But this has been very frustrating because we've been trying to renovate and fix them and replace them. Right. And there even in the administration building, it's the same issue in Dempsey that's going on. So so I understand the frustration. Yeah. We're trying to keep as much pressure as we can on this to address that. As far as people being concerned that the building might be toxic in some way, we've taken that very seriously. We actually, since that concern was raised, that building and several others were flooded on top of it. So then you got all the other issues about mold. We've been concerned about that. So those buildings have been, so to speak, swept and analyzed. There's been an environmental audit done. There's been an independent a group brought in to look at the issues and the concerns that the faculty and staff raised about that building. And those results have been shared with the occupants in the building, and they've indicated that there's no reason to be concerned about the building being toxic. Now there were some spots and places where the maintenance and the cleaning of things and the vents and the possibility of, there was some concern about asbestos, for example. Right. So there were a number of things found there that were, relatively speaking, minor, that I think is a good thing that came out of that are being and will be corrected. So those are, I guess I would say, Dan, that it's a little unfortunate that a group of people who felt they weren't being heard, had to do a petition, and it caught me, quite frankly, by surprise. I didn't know, which is maybe shame on me at some level, that there was that level of concern. And so that's one of the nice things about petitions, it gets your attention.
And the answer to doing the petition was and you missed the meeting, the first one is that the janitors in that building had been turning in work orders in that building for 2 or 3 years that had never been answered. And so the response to the faculty at that meeting was, don't blame the janitors. They communicated with you and the administration did not communicate back.
Well, there's more to it than that.
I'm sure there is. But
the fact there was communication breakdown. To suggest that people were raising complaints and concerns and the administrative leadership and facilities maintenance wasn't responding is not true. Okay. What they were doing, the actions they were taking often weren't known that there was action being taken. So the conclusion that nothing was being done because no one got back to us and said, well, this is what's being done or why we can't do this now, that's a fair conclusion, that we weren't doing a good job communicating back what was or wasn't being done and why. But to suggest that nothing was being done, that's not true.
But petitions in and of themselves are honorable procedures. I mean,
well,
we live in a democracy where, so I mean, it's not like, oh my God, you brought us a petition.
Right. It's fair. I mean, that's part of what that was something that's very important to me, is that people have to be, feel free to communicate their concerns, their criticisms, be whatever it is about, and not feel that they're going to be retaliated against. Exactly. I mean, that's something that's very important to me in our administration. And so this is proof of it. Yeah. If you don't have these types of things going on, and it's driven under because people are frightened that if they raise a serious concern, something they're concerned about, that somehow that's going to jeopardize their employment or something of that sort. That is not allowed at our campus. And I think there's plenty of evidence that people feel free to express what their concerns are. It makes us a better place. I think, particularly, I think we've all become much more sensitive and understanding about the issues of, quote, environmental health and buildings generally. None of us want to be in buildings that potentially could make us or our colleagues sick. And so we're all paying a lot more attention to that. Whether we're doing it quick enough, fast enough, and communicating well enough, well, we just got to get better at doing that, and that's what we're
And it's hard to deal with an old building that probably wasn't built clearly to standards today. I mean, it's an old building. It was, there is a lot of asbestos in that building.
Like there are in a lot of
in every building.
The question is, is it airborne and so on, and all the issues around that. Yeah, no,
well, thanks for your answers on that.
Well, thanks for the tough questions.
Well, let me just ask a kind of a follow-up to that. Not having known about this, what was it, and this is for either of you, or both, what was it that raised people's concerns about potential toxicity?
A large number of rare and odd ailments, autoimmune systems. 2 people, 3 people have died of cancer. There seems to be a cluster on the 4th floor. 1 person died, 1 has terminal cancer, 1 had cancer and has survived. It just, there's too many.
It appeared, the appearance was, but no, that's fair, and there's a lot of emotion with that for all of us,
You bet.
because these are our colleagues, that too many people appear to be getting very serious illnesses, and that, and I think it's understandable that people would say, why? You know, maybe it's something to do with our working environment, and so let's look into this and see what in fact is going on, not just to understand to the extent this may or may not impact our colleagues, but other people generally. And so, you know, you bring in epidemiologists. There are ways to go about and address that type of concern. I mean, just because people feel that, you know, this seems to be unusual, and it would. I mean, when you several people, colleagues on the same floor, you know, so well, let's look at this. Is this more than one would expect in a population of people, you know, in this area of the country? In these various demographic analysis and so on. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is to really do a scrub of the building to see what extent there may be things that are infecting people either in the air or the water and things of that sort. The wrong way of approaching this is to say, oh, these are just people who are upset and trying to understand what's happening to themselves and their colleagues, and they just can't, it's a why me thing, which is a very normal thing to go through, and so we're not going to pay any attention to this. No, that's totally insensitive to the fact that this is a tough time, you know, for these colleagues and their friends. And so that's part of what we talked about as administration, is that when these things come up, you know, we've got to pay attention to them and address those concerns. And you have to get the state, and you've got to have a process that people will have some confidence in. So we met and we discussed and we listened with them, and we brought in independent people, you know, to say, well, go through and look at this. Whatever you find, you find. We've got to get an answer to this question.
And in credit to Tom Sunletter is that there's a special committee that he chairs, 2 nurses and 2 people from education. It's a new committee. They were going to put it in a standing committee, and the people said, and he agreed to that, and so they work. I think they meet every other week. Minutes are taken of every meeting. The administration has been responsive, and you know, I think the end point for a lot of these people is they just want to make sure that this is a safe building, and clearly it's being cleaned, and I think that's, you know, they're not saying there's a direct correlation between.
They don't know.
They don't know.
So let's go find out.
So,
I mean, we're an academic institution.
So I think it's been a positive thing from, you know, both the faculty and staff, and clearly from the administration.
And I think the issue is, you know, are we being responsive quickly enough on something that's such a major concern? You know, maybe we could have been more responsive a little more quickly. But the point is, we have responded and we continue to respond.
So to this point then, Chancellor, nothing has really been found of a toxic level?
Not of the level, at least, again, I'm not the expert, and probably Tom is the one that should, because this is still in play, and there have been results and findings shared and discussed and that type of thing in these meetings. And to the best of my knowledge at this point, there's no evidence of that type of thing. Now, there were things that, you know, when the building's that old and you start really going through it with a fine-tooth comb, and you had all that water damage, you know, that popped up. So there's some good that came out of this, but nothing that would suggest that the building, you know, was basically toxic at the level that people felt it was. It was leading to an inordinate number of people getting these very serious illnesses. Now, there still may be some people that don't agree with what the findings to this date are suggesting, and that's fine. But I mean, the fact is, it is being, you know, seriously considered and researched, and at the same time, actions being taken to, you know, clean and fix things that need cleaning and fixing in this old 60s style building. So, and I'm going to just say one last thing. We didn't build so many darn prisons in Wisconsin. We might have getting a lot of our buildings up to speed and renovated the way they need to be. And that's, you know, that's a frustration we have, particularly in the comprehensive universities, where there's a backlog of a lot of these needed projects to renovate these old buildings. Not that they have to be taken out and started over, but you got to keep them you know, in shape and so on and so forth. So anyway, but that's not I'm not saying that as a justification for us not you know, taking these things seriously. It's just it's a context for some of the challenges that we have in our universities in the state of Wisconsin.
Sure. Well, let's move on to the sports complex, because that's been mentioned a couple of times. You know, for the old timers in town, it's what's known as Titan Stadium, over off of Sawyer Street and behind Zion Lutheran Church,
Right,
behind Zion. So,
Right.
you just earlier this week unveiled some renovations that have been done, and we've had Art and Tom on in the past talking about those renovations. But, you know, in case someone missed the show, Chancellor, just kind of recap briefly what has been done in this latest round of renovations.
Okay, well, we started working on the renovation of Titan Stadium, which is now J.J. Keller Field at Titan Stadium, and there's a reason for that in terms of a great gift the Kellers gave.
Full name, Oshkosh
Sports Complex. Which is really,
you know about that
really
new
exciting.
sign, right?
Right, yeah,
I know about that new sign.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, right. So you know, so if you just quickly go back and you know, what did we have? Well, we had again a facility that was put up in 1970. There hadn't been any significant maintenance on that building, you know, for until about 6 years ago. The building was basically leaking. It was fast becoming a major eyesore for our community. It had, you know, barbed wire fence around the top. We jokingly talked about it was like penitentiary architecture in a building that if we didn't start doing something with it, it was going to crumble and start falling down and become a major eyesore. So we felt we really needed. There are other reasons why we chose to give priority to getting the sports complex together that related to our facilities master plan for the other side of the river to move all the competition over there. So then the idea became, well, let's do this all together as a community. Let's provide a world-class facility for all of our student athletes and all of our middle schools, our two public high schools, and the Unified Catholic schools. And so the first phase resulted in the sealing up of the stadium, replacement of antiquated lights with lights that wouldn't throw all this glare all throughout the neighborhood. In fact, the lights that got replaced were so good that people complained in the stadium there wasn't enough light in the seating area to see where the steps were. So we fixed that, and then put the surfaces, the world-class track and soccer, football, and all that. Well, this phase we just finished now basically built out built upon and added more locker rooms. So there are 4 locker rooms in there. We finally have locker rooms for women's soccer and women's sports, which in terms of track and soccer, added a state-of-the-art, enhanced rather, a state-of-the-art athletic training room, offices, for our coaches, a new plaza area, new landscaping, new fencing, all that type of thing. So that's what we were celebrating a couple days ago in terms of a thank you back to all the people in the community individually, as well as businesses and foundations and so on, that put the money together for basically a $10 million upgrade of that particular facility. So that's what we were celebrating.
All right. Well, now we're going to throw another tough question.
Well, I knew it was coming, and it's fair. It's important.
And we've talked about this with Art and Tom when they were here as well.
I think we talked about the Chancellor last time we were here.
We talked about this too.
Yeah. Every time something is done at that facility, there are some complaints from neighbors. One neighbor in particular, and I'm not going to mention their names, but it's a husband and wife, and they continually raise complaints about noise, about litter, about light spillage. And I know from serving on the Board of Appeals that you guys have held neighborhood meetings. And have tried to be a good neighbor and work with things. But I think one of the things that these neighbors in particular and some of the folks who signed their petition, I don't know if it's their petition, but it's the neighbors' petition.
Yeah.
Another petition.
Good way to communicate.
It's the American way. What they're concerned about is, all these different things, but in particular, I guess, the fact that the noise is allowed to go on after 10 o'clock on certain nights when the city ordinance says no noise after 10, parking issues and things like that. They just feel like the university is sort of immune from the city ordinances with respect to some of those issues. So can you address that?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll start with that. Because we're a state entity, we are not controlled by some of the city ordinances. But that's not the way to respond to the issue. Mm-hmm. We want to abide by being good neighbors in the community and abide by the ordinances to the best of our ability, like anybody does. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you know, things happen like in the sporting event when there's bad weather. Mm-hmm. And so what do you want to do? It's the third quarter and send all the football players home and say we'll play the last quarter another day. Some people say, yeah, you should do that. So there's some reason sometimes when a particular ordinance might be threatened because of inclement weather or something of that sort. But that's not what I've sort of asked all our folks to do is don't play a card like that, because it's not really appropriate. That's not the issue. The issue is how can we be good neighbors in our hometown? And one way of doing that is, of course, is listening carefully to those neighbors that have some concerns about this particular facility. It's also inappropriate to say, well, you know, the facility was there before most, if not all, those neighbors were there, so you knew what you're. Mm-hmm. Well, that's just that's denying the fact that it doesn't matter. You need to be the best neighbor you can, you know, within a situation like that. So as far as light spillage, there's absolutely no question that, you know, if we didn't do this campaign and do all the upgrades, the light spillage is dramatically reduced. There's just no way out of arguing that, because they were old, antiquated lights that were going all over the place. These new lights not only took down the glare and the light spillage, but they're much more efficient and less expensive to run. As far as dust, that's a legitimate concern. And again, the two parking lots were, particularly the one that's close to the north end to our neighbors, was scheduled to be paved. Again, a state project, I don't want to hide behind that, and that will be done this summer. So that's fair. We try to, you know, keep that water down. We understand that's a problem, and we are going to fix that problem. Another problem that doesn't come up at all, which is a huge problem out there, again, before we paid attention to this and raised the money to enhance the stadium, was there was flooding in our neighbors' yards back there. It was a $60,000 project that corrected that problem. There was concern that there was too many people running in and out of the backyards of folks, so a fence was put up through there. You know, so there have been, this is just evidence that we not only have been having these meetings to, quote, let people vent, we've been listening and then say, okay, we can do something about that, give us a little time, and then we did X, Y, and Z, and we keep moving forward to keep making it a better environment. As far as noise, the issues there, we have litter. If you don't clean the stadium up right after an event, then what happens, and you do it, say, the next day, all that litter starts blowing in the neighbor's yard. So as soon, our process, as soon as the event's over, these big blowers come in and vacuums and one thing or another, and they're noisy. And I understand that, but we're trying to make sure the litter doesn't go in the neighbor's yards. Now, what happens, of course, in terms of after 10 o'clock, I think there are 4 double headers to make the facility work on behalf of everybody each year, and typically those games aren't over to 10 or 10:30. But then what happens is we've got to clean the stadium up. So one thing we did is we shut down the banks of lights that that go into the yard, and we're hiring more people to get the work done sooner, so those blowers and vacuums and one thing or another aren't making as much noise. I think one that we don't hear enough about is the issue of what's happening in terms of game management. And last year or so, I was coming back from Madison. There was a high school football game there. I think it was actually one of the Northwest games, and that draws a big crowd. Just like this, we're taping this on this Thursday, but tomorrow night there's going to be another game there. And I drove just to kind of see what was going on. And to tell you the truth, if I was a neighbor there, at least at that time, this got us to do some different things too. You have all these young people, preteens in a lot of cases, and some teenagers, all outside. The game's going on inside. You got all these people. They're across the street. They're running around. They're young people, But on the other hand, they're disturbing the peace, so to speak, in the neighborhood. So there has to be better, and that's what we've talked to Scott Grohl, our chief, and our own folks. They have the Oshkosh City Police, maintain this, particularly when the schools are out there. They're putting more community liaison officers out there, more people to kind of keep people moving, get inside, you're in the game, that type of thing, and that's something that we want people to do. I found out, for example, that it's somewhat of a practice with some of our parents, and I can understand why some parents do this, where they drop their preteen or their kid off, and they come back and pick them up sometimes an hour after the game's over. And in some communities, I'm not suggesting we do this, and I'd never want us to do this here, in these types of events they have a rule that you cannot leave a young person without an adult in a high school event. There has to be an adult with that person, or that person will be escorted or told to go home because of some of the issues that you have there. So I don't think we need to go that far. I just think we need to make our parents all aware of this particular issue and making sure that they're instructing their kids. You go into the stadium, or you can be underneath the stadium, but do not hold these little grouping meetings and so on in people's yards and lawns and on the sidewalks and things of that sort. So we are doing things, and our police chief, Oshkosh Police Chief Scott, is just doing a great job, and he was at these meetings too, and now they're doing it. We're going to get a test tomorrow night, but people will see a lot more enhanced enforcement and things of that sort. So I guess in sum, we need to keep listening, not get defensive, get disappointed when we're not doing things as well as we should be, and then figuring out how to improve that. But I think generally a lot of the neighbors in that area do appreciate the fact that we are listening and learning, and we don't intend to stop doing that. And so we're going to meet again after the fall season, maybe some end of this year or early into the winter, to then talk some more about how the fall went, what else can we do, that type of thing.
Sure.
So, and I think the Northwestern article on this a few days ago.
In the editorial today?
In the editorial was very fair.
Yes.
I mean, we're not perfect, but we're trying to do the best we can. We're trying to work as closely as we can with our partners as well. The other thing quickly is we're putting a new sound system in there. And what happens is, young people get the job of running some of that. And young people, I'm not picking on young people, they turn the volume up, and they shouldn't do that. So the new system is going to have a regulator on it, which will help there. So I think it's important for us to take the role of our neighbors. If you chose to live there, what would be reasonable expectation for how venues like that should be run and operated, and be respectful of our property and our lifestyles. And I think a lot of people there do enjoy the fact that there are events out there and they attend them. So that's how we're trying to handle it.
Sure. Well, and I think that's a really good approach. And, it's kind of a work in progress, if you will.
And it always will be.
As you continue to make changes there, and as society changes, and as your venues change, or your events change, you have to keep tweaking things.
Absolutely.
And yet, by the same token, I think there are some people who, no matter what you do, short of raising the entire thing and turning it into green space, will never be happy. And it's about meeting people halfway and finding a happy medium somewhere.
I think it'll work out. I live in the neighborhood near Menominee Park for Sawdust Days, and the new chief of police did a remarkable job this summer. He put police on bikes and walking, and a lot of those neighborhood complaints that had precipitated and gotten increased this will work out.
He's doing a lot of
the community policing thing.
Community policing thing is right down.
Absolutely.
Right down, right.
Yep.
We're going to go to 19. Should we go to 19-year-old drinking at this point, or I mean,
well, we can, sure.
I mean, we're not going to give him a break here.
Am I ever going to say I'm going to come back? No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. I mean, Dan brings up about the effort, desire on the part of some to lower the drinking age to 19, and I guess we want to talk about that, but. Here we have, we're only a couple weeks into the new academic school year here, and the city police have busted 2 illegal tavern and or keg parties, and given out a lot of citations. So maybe you can address that whole thing, and then we'll get into specifics.
Well, there is a group of presidents around the country led by John McCardle, who is the retired president from Middlebury College in Vermont, who's actually a friend of mine. We served on the NCAA Division III President's Council for 4 years together, and he's been, so to speak, on me all summer to sign up for this, and I chose not to. And basically, what they're doing is they're saying, let's have a debate or discussion about whether 21 is the right age limit to have for to be able to drink legally, and talk about 18. They're not saying, although they got interpreted that way throughout the country, that it should be 18. They just think that debate needs to be opened up again. And I guess the Highway Reauthorization Act federally is coming up within the next year, and these are the kinds of times to talk about things like that. That's why he and a number of, I think a little over 100 presidents around the country, signed this initiative. And I do believe a lot of them believe that the age should be lowered. I noticed, Cheryl, you used 19. Some people that believe it should be lowered feel 19 is the right age because they don't want, they're concerned about the high schools and having a number of people that are 18 years old and could drink legally and purchase alcohol.
Can I just put a background on here? You mentioned the Highway Authorization Bill, and if I have my history right on this, the 18-year-old drinking came out of the 60s. Kids were given the right to vote, and they were dying in Vietnam. And so my generation strongly believed in other states that, if you could die for your country at 18 and you were allowed to vote at 18, you ought to be able to drink. The change came when Ronald Reagan became president, and he put in the Highway Authorization Bill a penalty. If states did not increase the drinking age to 21, they would lose their federal highway funds, which is
hundreds
huge.
Of millions of dollars.
Oh, it's 90% of major roads, and Wisconsin, if I wasn't living here then, was one of the last states to comply with that. So I assume, Chancellor, when you're saying about the highway, that's a good time, because that would have to be taken out of that bill.
That's right.
To decrease it.
I'm just trying to give you, an explanation of why this came out at this time.
I just wanted to expand on it a little bit.
But I think it's pretty hard to argue that change has not significantly decreased the number of deaths, alcohol-related deaths on highways, and all the injuries that we forget about in terms of alcohol-related deaths on highways. I mean, there are some people that try to argue that no, it hasn't, but I think most people who studied this carefully and analyzed all the reads say that's not the case. It really has. I mean, it begs the question of maybe the age should be older, than 21.
Do you think that?
Well, I don't know. I'm 60, so I'm not too worried about it right now. I'm not going to go that high. But in all seriousness, the issue that this is part of is a huge issue in our country and our state and on our campuses throughout our country. So my feeling is that I'm more concerned about other types of things, laws at local and state level. For example, I think all kegs should be registered. I mean, you talked about these keg parties. I think I was brought up in the business now. I was brought up in an Italian-American restaurant, and we, members of what would be the restaurant league there, which would be comparable to the tavern league here, restaurant for 60-some years in my family. So I know about what I'm talking about, and I know that most of our folks that have liquor license and running taverns and restaurants are wonderful people. I mean, I have to believe that. That's where I come from, and their businesses are community living rooms and so on and so forth, and they are very responsible in how they do things. Now, there's a small subset of people who have licenses, who do things that really do encourage abuse of alcohol, in terms of major drink specials, selling kegs to people without having any deposit, or you take 5 kegs and then you bring back what you don't use and we'll reimburse you. That's an unethical, in my opinion, business practice. It's legal in the state, in our community, but I'm more concerned about things like that. On the other hand, I get concerned that people think, well, if you change one rule or law, then everything's going to be okay. that's not the case. So what we try to do is we think education is important. I mean, how do we help people learn how to use alcohol in an appropriate way if they choose to do that? By the way, about a third of our students, and this is true nationwide, don't drink at all. My son drinks nothing. My daughter likes wine and things. And sometimes my wife and I look at us and say, what happened to Chris? You know, but that's his choice, and that's fine. So we want to reinforce the responsible use. We want to set an environment of safety, you know, in terms of when this is done, because a lot of bad things happen when people abuse alcohol, in terms they do things they wouldn't otherwise do. There's clear evidence of relationship to sexual predation. Alcohol is used that way. So sexual abuse is a factor that a thing that we need to be very, very concerned about in the relationship to alcohol abuse. So good education, set an environment where that it's safe for people, and enforce. Whatever the law is, enforce. So part of this issue in terms of what's happened here in town with our police, they got a grant to help do this. I'm not too crazy that necessarily that they always want to focus and call it a university issue. This issue beyond university in our community. But nonetheless, I think it's important to enforce. If you don't enforce, you're sending really mixed messages. So that's how we're looking at this, and because of the complexity of it, you know, I've chosen not to sign. Another reason is I didn't have a chance to hear, you know, what our student leaders think, what our student affairs people think. What, you know, this is a very emotional topic on a campus, and for a chancellor to sign something without, you know, getting up to speed on what the research is, and then listening to what his or her community thinks. I don't do things like that usually. Try not to anyway.
Are there still bars over in the Wisconsin Street area that are offering free drinks to girls like on Wednesday night?
I have no absolute.
My daughter graduated 5 years, and that was a complaint as a parent. You know, girls get to drink free on Wednesday night.
Yeah, well,
we know what's going on.
Well, think about, you know, what message that's sending.
Yeah.
You know, and think about sexual predators.
That's right.
And think there are a lot of people that don't view themselves as sexual predators. You know, that will do things to get someone drunk, to take advantage of them. You know, they don't look at it that way. You know, but I mean, those are the things that we have to be careful with, and the things that we have a responsibility as an educational institution to point out. So, and we're not very popular about that. We had the whole pub crawl thing, and we tried to be consistent, you know, about those things. So, a big issue, an important one. You know, my colleagues that signed on to that, I respect why they're doing that. They're just as concerned about this as I am. They have a different way of trying to approach it. And right now, it's not a way that I'm willing to.
President Ripon College, I think, signed on, and the former chancellor at Parkside did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not under any ban by the system. If you wanted to do it, you could come out, or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not. They're not going to say, well, you can't do that.
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
When I think the last time you were on, Chancellor, was back in November of last year, and it seems to me about that time the Underground in Reeve was starting to serve beer. Are they still doing that?
Well, what happened there? So this is a good example. This was a debate, discussion that went on between primarily the administration and our student leadership. There were, before Reeve Union was renovated and the addition added onto it, there was beer served in that union, and there are, in many cases across our system. In fact, I think one of our campuses has a brewery. You know, Madison Student Union has beer. It's not. It's more the case than not. And we chose, when they did the renovation and addition, they wanted to have a non-alcoholic nightclub area, and argued that there are plenty of opportunities for people right off the campus and in our community to legally go and, you know, go hear some music, drink some beer, whatever, and there wasn't really a need for that. Our student governance groups over the years really felt that, no, we should have, in our own union, we paid for it, there's no state tax dollar money in it, we used to be able to do this, we should be able to legally have a beer in our you know, it's kind of a comedy club atmosphere, music down there. It's really very nice. It was very well done. And we went back and forth on that and said, well, we want to have a venue where there is an option. And so we eventually, and we talked through all the issues about responsible use of alcohol and beer, and if we're going to do that, how it would be set up. And so basically we compromised. We said, okay, on Monday, on Sunday, Monday, I think, and Tuesday, they can serve beer in the Titan Underground. The rest of the time they can't. So then you had opportunities when entertainment and music and comedians are there, for example, there's not alcohol served.
Sure.
But when people want to go watch the Packers on Sunday, okay. And you know, and not everyone was happy about that necessarily. I mean, there are people in the administration and the student affairs side that weren't happy about that. There are others that aren't happy that it's not all week. You know, so it's one of those things where you think, well, we think we did the responsible thing, and maybe we just made a lot of people not happy. But nonetheless, I think it was handled well and thoughtfully done, and that's something that is going on our campus.
Okay. We've got about 6 minutes left. Do you want to touch on the city issues?
Yeah, I do, but I want to hit a personal question first.
Okay.
Someone asked me many years ago, 30 years ago, when I got involved in politics, why I got involved in politics. And my answer is because I spent 16 years in Catholic schools and I worked for a university. Because those were both very strong political organizations. There are rumors around town. I just want to ask you because people want to know what your future is at UWO. And so I want to ask you first.
I'm not running for governor.
Okay. Mark that one off.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Are you actively looking for other positions right now?
No, not now. But
Okay.
I've said all along that if opportunities come up that are the right ones for me and my family, to keep me engaged and challenged, I will consider those. So
Okay.
I know that makes some people uncomfortable and think that that means I'm not loyal to UW-Oshkosh. I'm sorry they feel that way, because there's nothing could be further from the truth. I love this place. I put all my heart and soul in it, and it's my right as anybody else to be concerned about, not my right, my responsibility of what the future should be for myself and my family. Yeah.
Do you think you'll be here in 2 or 3 years?
Don't know. I might be here. You know, I might retire here. Okay. I can't answer that. I mean, I think it's, another way of answering the question, Dan, and this is a little bit different, but it gives context to it, is that, basically to be effective in a leadership position like this, most people argue it's somewhere between a 7 to 11, 12 years. That, and it varies in different situations. It's not good for the person to leave sooner than that, and it's not good for the institution for the person to leave sooner than that. It's also not good for the person, the institution, for someone to stay too long, because a lot of good things happen when leadership changes in an appropriate time. It gives the campus a renewed way of thinking about where they are and where they ought to go, and that type of thing. And someone once said the 2 best points that a president of a university or chancellor of a university serves as campus is when they come and when they leave. And then there's some people out there that say, yeah, he's right, wait till he leave. But in all seriousness, it's because it's more than about that individual. And on the other hand, some people want the stability. They just want someone to, like in the old days, like president and chancellor served 15, 20, 25, 30 years. In this day and age, that is not a good thing for our university community. So when you ask that question,
because
if I'm
people
here
do talk about it.
Well, sure,
Yeah.
and that's fair.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe sometimes I think some of my colleagues and advisors think they advise me to skirt the question and just say, oh yeah, I'm going to be here forever and so on. And no, I don't think that's an honest response.
Sure,
most people are very comfortable with that. It's just being open and honest about what you're thinking about and what you're doing. And so I think the best way to respond to it is, I'm getting at that point where I'm going into my 9th year where it's getting close to. Does that mean I'll go somewhere else? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you'll have to deal with me as a member of the faculty, as well. So you don't know, and that's the wonderful thing about life. You don't know.
Right.
And I'm not ready to retire in any means at all. So I think I got a good 10 years left in me at some level. So
downtown development. every 2 months we have some new person on here who has a new plan for the river development, and then 2 months later we have someone else. Yeah. In the ideal world, and you've had some interesting ideas on condos and lifelonging things. If you had $50 million that you could put, or $20 million, what would you do with the river development? What would be your first choice? What do we need down there?
Well, I do think we need a combination of retail and residential. I do think we need to make sure that we put opportunities for home ownership in there. I think it's good that we have apartments, but I think part of helping a downtown really, get going again and stabilizing people coming and owning homes. Yeah. So I really don't want to see a lot more apartments there. Okay. I think condos are still important. I think the living, learning, serving idea that we've had. People that want to come and own and live close to university and get engaged in it is one way to help make that go. I think we need, and I'm just saying obvious with a lot of people, we need a grocery store. We need a hotel. There's no question in my mind that that's very important on that site. In addition to getting a Pioneer up and running, well, not the Pioneer, whatever the future. That's that site plus the Park Plaza. We need another hotel in there. I'm not sure, I'm not an expert about office space, but that's part of mixed retail and so on, So those are the types of things that I would hope eventually come in there. It's a tough time to try to do this. Yeah. I don't think we have to wait for the most perfect thing. The other thing is I want to make sure that this whole new urban principle is that our community has access to the riverfront. Yeah. So however that gets built out, I'm as concerned about the architecture looking right and being welcoming, opening, and it's not some little ghetto that's in a sense of an expensive ghetto that keeps people out. So that's another thing I'm concerned about, because that's a very important property. It needs to be seen as a public space. It's hard to do. I mean, those are going to be hard things to do. But that's what when anyone ever asks us, that's what I'm pushing for. I'm very concerned about more apartments there because of the impact it's having in the neighborhoods around, around the campus, and some of these, really wonderful older homes, some of them small, some of them medium size. And now, you're starting to see more vacancies in there, and we all in the community need to pay more attention to that. So, and then, you got the private sector has some right to do what they want with their property, obviously, but it's in their benefit to plan with the public sector, how to make all those neighborhoods work. So it's very sensitive and very difficult work, but I am glad it's being discussed. I just wish we would commit to something and get moving, but not anything, so.
All right. Well, we've got so many other things to cover, and we don't have enough time. So we want to have you back again, and not like 10 months from now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I'd like to.
We hope we weren't too tough on you.
No, one of the reasons I like coming here is because you'll ask the tough questions. There's there's no value in just. There are a lot of great things going on at the university. We all know that, so you don't need to hear that all the time. We need to talk about what the issues are and what the challenges are, and I do appreciate the kinds of questions.
We try to be fair.
I think you're fair.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for us. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.
Good.